Have you ever noticed that some people don't need to raise their voices to be heard? They don't beg for attention. They don't chase validation. They simply disappear. They step back. They choose silence over reaction, presence over performance. And suddenly, everything around them begins to shift. People take notice. The mood changes. Questions arise. There's a strange kind of power in not being available, in no longer responding on command to every message, every emotion, every demand that isn't yours to carry. It's as if your absence says more than your presence ever could. You stop being predictable, and in doing so, you become unforgettable. Carl Jung saw this, the incredible strength hidden in restraint, in withdrawal, in stillness. Because when you stop being available to everyone, something profound begins to happen. Today, we're going to explore that shift and why silence might be the loudest, most powerful thing you've ever chosen. There comes a point in life when you stop trying to be everything for everyone, not because you no longer care, but because you finally understand the cost of constant availability. You begin to see how much of your energy has been scattered, how often your time has been given away, not in acts of love, but in silent desperation for belonging, for approval, for peace. And it's in that awareness that a quiet revolution begins. You start pulling back, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You no longer answer right away, not out of spite, but because urgency is not the same as importance. You stop over-explaining yourself, not because you have something to hide, but because you realize your truth doesn't require permission to exist. That's when people notice. The ones who thrived on your reactions begin to panic. The ones who used your openness as a door to manipulate now find it closed. And they knock louder, but you don't answer. There is immense power in that choice, in no longer showing up just to prove your worth, in no longer being predictable, pliable, and emotionally available on command. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming whole, and wholeness demands boundaries. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the sacred becoming of your authentic self. A self that is no longer shaped by others' needs, but by your own essence. And this kind of transformation doesn't roar. It withdraws. It observes. It lets silence do what arguments never could. Because silence reveals. It forces others to look at themselves instead of projecting onto you. And it forces you, finally, to look within, not through the lens of how others see you, but through the deep mirror of your own presence. When you withdraw, the world resists. It calls you distant. It calls you selfish. It calls you changed. But that's only because you've stopped playing the role that made others comfortable. The moment you stop being constantly available is the moment people are forced to face what they've taken for granted. And what a revelation that is, not just for them, but for you. You realize that the power you thought you had to earn was always yours to reclaim, and the peace you were chasing in others was always waiting in your own stillness. From a young age, we were taught that love must be earned, that being good meant being agreeable, being available, being there for others, even when it hurt. And so we became the ones who always answered the phone, who showed up even when we had nothing left to give, who said yes when our entire being was screaming no. We learned to survive by being needed. We mistook approval for affection and validation for connection. Every time someone said, "Thank you, you're always there for me," it felt like a win. But deep down, a subtle erosion was taking place. Our sense of self, worn down not by a single event, but by the constant drip of self-abandonment disguised as kindness. We don't talk about this often, but being emotionally available to everyone is not a sign of strength. It's a symptom of fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing people. So we keep showing up. We respond instantly to messages even when we're tired. We laugh at jokes that cut too deep. We say we're fine when we're barely holding on. And we tell ourselves that this is love. But it's not. Because love doesn't ask you to betray yourself in order to stay connected. Love doesn't demand your presence at the cost of your peace. And here's the truth no one tells you. The more available you are, the less you are valued. What is always accessible becomes invisible. People start to assume that your time, your energy, your empathy are endless, like air. They forget to ask how you are. They stop noticing when you're hurting. Because your presence has become a given, they only reach out when they need something. And because you've trained yourself to always say yes, they keep taking. Not out of cruelty necessarily, but out of habit. And habits, when unchallenged, become expectations. Eventually, you're no longer seen as a person. You become a role, the helper, the comforter, the fixer. And roles are replaceable, disposable, forgotten once they stop functioning. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted by the world. It's the smile when you want to cry, the silence when you want to scream, the enthusiastic, sure, I can help, when you're already at your breaking point. This mask is not your identity. It's a performance, a survival strategy. And the longer you wear it, the harder it becomes to take off. Because after a while, even you forget who you were before you learned to be what others needed. But let me tell you something you may not have heard in a long time. You don't owe anyone your constant availability. You don't have to explain why you need space. You don't have to justify your silence. And most importantly, you don't have to be everything for everyone to be worthy of love. Your worth is not measured by your usefulness. Your value does not increase based on how many people you save. You are allowed to reserve your energy. You are allowed to walk away from conversations that exhaust you. You are allowed to protect your peace as if it's sacred, because it is. And yes, there will be consequences. People will pull away when you stop playing the part. Some will accuse you of being selfish, cold, or distant. But that's not about you. That's about their discomfort in losing access to your emotional labor. They were never in love with you. They were in love with the version of you that made them comfortable. And when that version disappears, so will they. But that's okay, because the ones who truly care will stay even when you are no longer convenient. This is the beginning of something deeper, something honest. When you stop being emotionally available to everyone, you begin to reconnect with yourself, with your needs, your voice, your limits. And you start to hear something beneath the noise, your intuition. That quiet whisper that says, you don't have to keep proving your worth. You've always been enough. And that voice is the beginning of your freedom. Carl Jung didn't see the human psyche as just thoughts and memories. He saw it as an energy system, a living current of psychic force that flows through everything you think, feel, and do. And like any energy system, it has limits. Yet most of us live as if our energy is infinite. We give it away without awareness, in arguments that go nowhere, in justifications no one asked for, in compulsive apologies, in proving ourselves to people who will never really see us. Every time we react emotionally, especially when triggered or provoked, we release a burst of psychic energy. And if we're not careful, this energy doesn't return. It dissipates. It drains us. And then we wonder why we're exhausted after a conversation, why we feel empty even when surrounded by people. There's a reason for that. You are leaking energy through the cracks of your reactions. And the world, knowingly or not, feeds on those leaks. Not everyone in your life is malicious, but many are hungry. They don't know how to regulate their own emotional chaos, so they reach for your calm and pull you into their storm. They ask for your advice, but ignore it. They vent endlessly without pause. They seek your presence, not to connect, but to relieve themselves. And because you've made yourself available, you become the vessel. They pour in their fears, their dramas, their emotional debris, and walk away lighter, while you carry the weight. Jung warned us, the more you resist something, the more it persists. And resistance takes energy. When someone criticizes you and you rush to defend yourself, when someone provokes you and you respond with fire, when someone dismisses you and you go chasing their approval, that's energy being stolen. Not just time or attention, but the core of your inner power. The saddest part? Most of us do it automatically. We don't even realize we've handed the wheel to someone else until we're spinning out, wondering how we lost control. But this can change. It begins with awareness, noticing your patterns. What makes you instantly reactive? What conversations always leave you drained? Who do you always feel you must explain yourself to? These are the pressure points. And if you don't guard them, the world will press them again and again, until your energy is scattered in 1,000 directions, and there's nothing left for yourself. Here's what Jung taught. A healthy psyche is one that knows how to conserve energy, not by avoiding life, but by becoming selective with it. It means knowing when silence is more powerful than speaking. It means walking away instead of proving your point. It means learning that not every opinion deserves a response. Not every invitation is sacred. Not every cry for help is yours to answer. When you begin to protect your psychic energy, something amazing happens. You become less reactive and more intentional. You start responding from your center, not from your wounds. People sense this. They feel your groundedness, even in your silence. You walk into a room and need no words to be felt. You command presence, not by force, but by containment. Because when your energy is yours again, you radiate it differently. It stops being scattered light and becomes focused fire. Of course, some won't like this. The ones who relied on your imbalance will accuse you of being distant, detached, or difficult. But that's not your burden anymore. Let them call you cold. You know you're calm. Let them say you've changed. You know you've returned. To your body, to your breath, to your energy. This is the discipline of self-mastery. Not in isolation from others, but in sovereignty within yourself. In a world that rewards noise, loud opinions, constant availability, instant replies, silence is a threat. It unsettles people. It forces them to sit with what they've been running from. It strips away the distractions and leaves only the truth. That's why so few people master it. Because silence requires discipline. And even more than that, it requires self-trust. To go quiet in a world begging for your reaction is to reclaim your power, not by force, but by absence, not by aggression, but by retreat. Because silence, when chosen consciously, is not emptiness. It is concentration. It is strength pulled inward. It is presence distilled into its purest form. Carl Jung understood that real transformation never happens through argument. It doesn't happen in endless debates or in the noise of trying to prove your worth. Real transformation happens in solitude, in the silence between words, in the choice to no longer perform. You begin to see that your voice is an instrument of intention, not obligation. That not everyone deserves a response. That many situations are not meant to be fixed, but walked away from. And the more you live from this place, the more you recognize how little of what you once called connection was ever real. Most people don't relate to you. They relate to the version of you that serves their narrative. The you who replies quickly, the you who softens your tone to avoid conflict, the you who bends and breaks just to be understood. But the moment you withdraw, the illusion breaks. You step out of the role you were playing. You stop being the mirror they used to avoid themselves. And they don't know what to do with that. They feel threatened. Not because you hurt them, but because your silence exposes how little they truly knew you. And still, you must choose it. Again and again. The silence. The space. The discipline to remain grounded in your peace when everything in you wants to be heard, to be seen, to be understood. But understand this. Being misunderstood is not failure. It is a rite of passage. It is proof that you've stopped making yourself small just to be palatable. That you've stopped contorting yourself just to remain included in places where your soul never fit. You will be called distant, arrogant, cold, but only by those who were warmed by your self-abandonment. Because what silence does, more than any explanation ever could, is reveal the truth of things. The people who only valued your compliance will leave. The ones who fed off your reactions will try to provoke you. The ones who never saw your soul will miss the version of you they could control. But something else will emerge in the emptiness they leave behind. Something sacred. You, not the version crafted through expectation or guilt, but the real you. Whole, quiet, steady, rooted in peace, aligned with truth, unapologetically whole. This is the birth of individuation. The becoming of who you were before the world told you who to be. The slow, sacred emergence of self that doesn't need constant validation to exist. And in this space, in this quiet, you begin to hear something you forgot existed, your own voice. Not the reactive voice, not the performative voice, but the voice that rises from deep within. The one that says, I do not need to be everywhere. I do not need to be everything. I just need to be true. And that truth becomes your boundary, your compass, your healing. No more being available for everything and everyone. No more handing your energy to those who don't respect it. No more apologizing for choosing stillness over noise. This is your reclamation. This is your return. The silence is not the end. It is the beginning of wholeness, of clarity, of sovereignty. And when you learn to sit in it, truly sit in it, you realize you were never missing anything. You were just distracted from yourself. When you finally stop being available to everyone, something unexpected begins to unfold. At first, it feels like loss. The silence is jarring. The space feels heavy. You start to question yourself, wondering if you've gone too far, if you've become too detached, too distant, too guarded. The absence of noise, of constant connection, of the usual messages and calls, it can feel like grief. Because you're not just letting go of people or habits. You're letting go of the version of yourself who needed them. The one who kept saying yes out of fear. The one who mistook exhaustion for love. That version begins to fade, and that's when the discomfort sets in. But stay there. Stay in the silence long enough, and the panic begins to soften. What once felt like emptiness starts to feel like peace. You wake up and realize you're not waiting for someone's message to feel whole. You're not rehearsing explanations in your mind. You're not stretching yourself to maintain connections that only ever existed on the surface. Instead, you're with yourself. fully, not performing, not proving, just present. And in that presence, something holy happens. You begin to heal. Solitude, when chosen, becomes sacred. It's no longer isolation, it's integration. You start to gather the parts of yourself that you left behind trying to please others. You remember what you love without influence. You reclaim your thoughts, your rhythm, your intuition. You sit with your past, your pain, your patterns, and for once, you don't try to escape. You listen, you forgive, you grieve, you transform. And as that transformation unfolds, something even deeper emerges: wholeness. Not the kind that depends on being liked, understood, or included, but the kind that says, I am enough as I am, even in silence. Jung called this the journey of individuation, the sacred path back to your true self. It requires separation. It requires stillness. And it almost always requires loneliness. Not because you're unworthy of love, but because you're finally removing yourself from relationships where love was conditional on your abandonment. You'll notice something too. As you become more whole, the world becomes more selective. Some people will fade, not because you pushed them away, but because you stopped giving them the version of you that made them comfortable. And those who remain, they'll meet you with depth, with presence, with truth. Because now, you're no longer performing to be seen. You're simply being. And that presence, whole, quiet, unapologetic, is magnetic in a way that needing never was. But even if no one stays, even if everything around you shifts, the most important thing remains. You've come home to yourself. Fully. Finally. You've stepped out of the role. You've broken the pattern. You've stopped offering yourself in pieces just to feel needed. And in doing so, you've become whole. Alone, yes, but not lonely. Solitude is no longer your punishment. It's your power. The power to stand without shrinking, to speak without defending, to love without losing yourself. This is what it means to be reborn, not into someone new, but into someone real. Not into perfection, but into peace. You no longer chase love, you become it. You no longer seek approval, you live in alignment. You don't react, you choose. And in every choice, you honor your energy, your boundaries, your truth. You don't owe your availability to anyone. You owe your authenticity to yourself. This is sacred. This is rare. This is freedom. So if you're sitting in silence right now, wondering if you've made a mistake, wondering if letting go means losing everything, know this: you haven't lost yourself. You've finally found yourself. And in this silence, in this solitude, in this sovereign stillness, a new self is being born. Not the helper, not the fixer, not the emotional lifeline, but the whole, grounded, radiant human who no longer asks, "Who do I need to be?" and instead whispers, "I already am." If these words found a home inside you, if they reminded you of your strength, your peace, your worth, take a moment to breathe that in. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply returning to yourself. And that's the most powerful journey there is. If this message spoke to you, I invite you to stay connected. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next reflection. Leave a comment below and write, "I choose my peace." Let's see how many souls are ready to walk this path together. And if you know someone who gives too much, who feels invisible, who needs to remember their own value, share this video with them. You never know whose healing might begin with your silence or with your share. Until next time, protect your energy, honor your boundaries, and remember, your peace is power.